I want to know what, was going through your head when you made the decision, because again, pre-med student, you're thinking about being a doctor, and you made a decision, and I know it has something to do with your dad, and you made a decision to get into that life. Let's talk and tell the audience a little bit about why you made that decision to get into the life when that wasn't the path you were on.
Strictly to help my dad get out of prison. I didn't aspire to be a mobster. I wasn't, wow, this is the great life I want to pursue. My dad felt that was the way that when I decided I wasn't going to school, because Joe Colombo had a powerful influence on me. He was the boss of the family. And a lot of my dad's friends telling me, your dad's going to die in prison. And I said, no, I can't let that happen. I went to see my dad. He told me he was framed. He said, I'm innocent. I believed him. If he would have said, I'm guilty and I got to do my time, I probably would have been a doctor. But he said, I'm innocent, and we got to help prove my innocence. Well, what did that mean to me? I can't do it while going to medical school. I had to help my dad. We had to get to the witnesses that testified against him, get them to recant their testimony, have money for lawyers, because people weren't throwing money at my dad when he went to prison. His money ran out. I had to support my family. So I said, okay, school isn't where it's happening. I got to help you, Dad. And that's totally the reason I got into the life. No other reason.
Right, and let's talk about that. Let's dive a little deeper there, because I don't think some of the audience understands that story. If I'm not mistaken, you correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that you believed your dad, because I'm guessing most people watching are saying his dad was in jail, his dad says he's innocent, and he just wants to help his dad, but well, his dad's probably not innocent. But a big part of the reason that you believed your dad was innocent, I'm guessing still believe today, is because you talked about how the people that testified against him were drug addicts. And tell us the story of the stories he would tell you growing up about drugs and how that ended up playing out, and the reason that you truly feel that he was innocent.
Yes. I'll take that to my grave. I know my dad was innocent. He was no bank robber. Absolutely not. I investigated that case. We spoke to every witness. They recanted their testimony. We gave them lie detector tests that proved they lied at the trial. We just could never get the conviction overturned. He was framed on that case. I was guilty of the crime I went to jail for. My dad was innocent of that crime. Maybe he did other things in his life. He was no angel, I'm not saying that. But that particular crime that he did 40 years in prison for, my dad was innocent, and I'll take it to my grave. My dad hated anything to do with drugs. He would create stories about people that died over drugs or whatever. He hated drugs, and he never wanted me to have a motorcycle. He would make up stories about people that got killed in motorcycle crashes, and I would never get a motorcycle. When I told him I wanted one, that's when he started telling me stories about how bad it was. And I trusted my dad. I believed him. So I said, okay, Dad, if you're saying it's no good, I'm not going to do it. And drugs, I have never until this day even smoked a joint. Never taken any kind of drug.
Nothing at all?
No, prescription drugs if I'm given something, and I don't even like that. I'm afraid of drugs. I hate it. I'm afraid I might like it. Alcohol. My dad used to tell me 3 things, son, you got to worry about. Wine, meaning alcohol, drugs, and women. He said, those are the 3 things that are going to destroy you.
But you're a wine guy now, aren't you?
Well, yeah. Yes, but not to that extent. We don't overconsume. Right. Yes. And I get hit up for that too. You're a Christian and you're selling wine. I have to go into the whole Jesus created, his first miracle was changing water into wine. But anyway, so I believed it. He wouldn't associate with drug addicts. Absolutely not.
And those 3 guys were drug addicts?
4 of them. They're all drug addicts, yeah. All of them were involved in drugs. And what they did, they committed all these bank robberies. They just created a meeting where they said my dad told them to do it. That was it. One meeting, one time. They never even handed him money. How he got convicted, his lawyer, whatever. But anyway, so yeah, I believed him. And he said, son, if you're going to help me out and you're going to be on the street to help me, you need to become part of my life. Okay, Dad. I'm ready.
And that's what you did. Okay, so let's talk about the next steps after that, because you didn't right away start making $8 million a week. What did those first years look like, right? Before the money, before the scale, what were you actually doing day to day?
Well, at 20 years old, when I hit the street, I became a target of law enforcement. I got indicted 5 times. I went to trial for 1.5 years almost on nonsense crimes, but they kept me in the courthouse. I got 3 hung juries on one case. Another one was dismissed, and they just kept, wearing me down. So I was totally broke at 21. Didn't have a penny. Paid for my lawyer as best. I had a bad lawyer, paid for him as best I could, and I was broke. So I had to get into something. I could not stand not having money in my pocket. I just couldn't. I couldn't sleep. I'm still that way, right? So I had to try to get going, anything that I can get going. And it started out with me being in the car business and hustling and working 24/7. And then when I got involved in the life, I started doing things on the street. And I mean, that's a whole, we'll be here for, the next 10 hours if we get into all of that. But that's how it started for me.
Guys, we've been so passionate about finding the biggest geniuses, and this is just one of the many episodes. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, make sure to subscribe. All right, let's get back to the episode. And you ran, at some point, what the FBI says was $1 billion operation. When you were in it at the peak, did you know how extraordinary it was, or were you just kind of like, I'm solving the next problem, I'm moving day to day?
I started to understand it early on. I realized this could be a gold mine, a bonanza. And that's why I dove into it so heavily. And really was able to, the guy that brought me the idea and was really the architect of it, but it had a lot of holes in it, and it would never have worked if we didn't concrete all those holes and get it to work seamlessly. And I was able to assist him heavily in that. And I was able to get the licenses that we needed and everything. And I said, man, if I took this across the country, and I would have been making billions a month. Because with collecting tax on gasoline, think of it. In New York alone, the federal and the state tax was 40 cents a gallon, depending upon where you were located. And we were doing 500 million gallons of gas a month.
500 million?
500 million. And we were paying no tax. We weren't paying like a little. We were paying no tax.
You were pocketing, the scheme was to pocket the tax. And it might take them 10 months or so to figure it out, set up a new company.
I had 18 shell companies, and every one of them were formed in Panama.
And you were able to continue to operate that for years, and you were just pocketing millions of dollars. Not on top of that, you were able to deliver gas to gas stations at a lower cost than they would have been paying. So they wanted to do business with you.
They were happy.
It was easy.
I would go to a gas station, let's say it was a mobile station, and I would say, how many loads of gas are you getting from mobile? Oh, we get 6 loads a week. I said, well, buy 4 from them and 2 from us. We'll save you 10 cents a gallon. That's a lot of money for them, 10 cents a gallon. Before you know it, they're trying to buy all 6 from us. And I said, you can't do that. You're going to lose your brand. You have to buy some from mobile. So we had to chase people away. And I'll tell you even more. The major companies, like I bought a terminal from BP, British Petroleum. They loved us. The major companies, we were buying barges from them as they came from the Middle East. We were buying the barges. We were selling it back to their own stations. They didn't care because we were increasing the volume. The FBI went to them and said, the mafia, you're dealing with mafia guys. Oh, we'll be careful. And then they'd call us up and say, hey, the feds were here, be careful.
So they would tip you off.
Everybody but the government was happy. Everybody. People on the street were happy. They were paying less at the pumps. The major brands were happy because we were buying more gas. Only the government got hurt.
Wow. And so that version of you at 35, right? $10 million in cash a week. You're on Fortune list. You have, I think, a jet, a helicopter. You have many houses. What would he think of where you are today? What would he maybe respect, and what would he think is weak?
I have to say this, and I'm going to get beat up for it, but I don't have a moral issue with defrauding the government. I'd tax on every gallon of gasoline, especially today when they're doing it in Minnesota and they're pocketing themselves. I would at least give it back to the people. I would share it. I would be beneficial in that regard. But I won't do it because I'm not going to get in trouble or jeopardize my family. But, look, I was happy with my accomplishments to that point. I have to say that. And throughout all of this, understand this. I'm a major target of law enforcement. I was indicted 7 times. There wasn't a day when I didn't have an investigation on me. From the time I was 20 years old, they were watching me every day. 7 indictments. Excuse me. 2 major racketeering cases with the feds and 1 with the state of Florida. So I had to be dodging bullets from the state and the feds and also my own people, because as I'm progressing through that life, I got a target on my back from other people. It was tough to deal with, honestly. I'm not saying I didn't have peace because, I worked 7 days a week, but it was a lot to deal with at a young age. And I don't know how I was resilient. I can't, you know, you don't claim credit for this thing. When you just have that built, you're just fortunate. You know, I mean, I can't say, well, I studied this and I was such a good learner that I created. No, I was just born with this innate quality that allowed me to get through all of this. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And how do you see that life today? An evil life? When you look back?
I see I'm ambivalent, and sometimes I have issues with my wife because I say, oh, these were good guys. And she's from a perfectly legitimate and reasonable perception of this. So, well, how could you say they were good? They killed people and this and that. But there was a lot of good people there that I missed and that I really cared for. I had good friends in that life. And I miss them because they're all gone. So did I hate the life? No. When I left the life, I didn't hate anybody. I wasn't mad at anybody. I didn't leave because, oh, these people were after me. When they were after me, they were supposed to be after me because I left the life and I wasn't supposed to do that. So I understood that. I wasn't mad at them. I think if I would have got killed, I couldn't even be mad at somebody because I was supposed to get killed according to the oath that I took. This sounds crazy, but that's how I believe. Even with my father, they said, your father he went along with the contract on your life. I kind of understood that. I don't think he would have ever done it. He would have never put a gun to my head. There's no way. I don't care what anybody says. No way my dad would have done that. But did he go along with it, maybe to protect himself and not to, he didn't know what I was going to do? Okay, I get it. I understand. Now, maybe that's a crazy way to think, because my wife says to me, you would never do that to your son. Well, of course I wouldn't. Different circumstances, and like I said, I don't know, maybe I have a crazy way of thinking, but it's just the way I feel.
It seems the people in that life, or at least the people you're talking about, you mean yourself and your father, you kind of followed the rules of that life, even if it meant putting those rules over your own family at times, potentially, when you were in that life.
That's the one discussion I had with my dad, and that was kind of a deal breaker for me. Because when I sat down with my dad after my mother had passed away, and I said, our whole family was destroyed, Dad, because of this life. And he said, well, it wasn't my fault. I said, what do you mean it wasn't your fault? He said, well, I was framed for a crime I didn't commit. If that wasn't the case, none of this would have happened. I said, Dad, you were framed not because you were a doctor, a lawyer, or a priest. You were framed because you're a mob guy. We got to expect those things, And he said, it's not my fault. And he kind of blamed my mom. And I said, come on, Dad, you got to take responsibility for the destruction in our family. And he wouldn't. Now, maybe that was guilt. I understood, and I didn't want to press him too hard. But it was upsetting that he wouldn't take responsibility, because I thought we were close enough where he could have said, you know what, son, you're right. You're right. But he didn't.
An FBI informant once put your name next to 5 murders. You were never charged with any of them. But what do you think of those accusations? Well,
they were false, number one. And number two, the informant that brought the story and really tried to jam me up with it, he was later thrown out of the witness protection program for lying. And everything that he said was just dismissed, because he implicated me and a number of other people. So, and I told the FBI he's lying. I said, I knew the guy very well. So it turned out to be a false accusation and something that I was fighting against.
And were you involved in those deaths in any way at all?
No.
And the person that you're talking about, Big Sal?
Big Sal, yeah.
Right. He named specific murders.
Yes.
Not the accusations generally, the specific incidents he named. Walk me through, where were you? What did you know about those? Were those just made up incidents? Were they incidents that actually happened that were tied to the family in some way?
Well, these people were murdered. No question. He didn't make up that somebody got murdered that wasn't murdered. They were murdered. But he implicated the wrong people. Bottom line. And he was probably involved in all of them. And, listen, one thing that I am sorry, and I don't know if you saw the Jubilee when I sat down with 20 different cops and we went into this. I do not believe that people are entitled to a free pass when they've committed a murder and they bargain with the government and they give them a pass on those murders, to implicate other people. It's strong incentive to lie. Strong incentive to lie. And they shouldn't be given that advantage. So I think in this case, that's exactly what happened with Michaud. I knew him well. He was He wasn't one of the more prominent guys in that life. Let me be kind to him right now, even though he doesn't deserve that, but I'll be kind to him. So he made up like other informants. I'm going to tell you this, and I'll stand by this. I've been to trial 5 times, and I've visited, I can't tell you how many other trials. I've been to 3 trials of my dad's. I've never seen a government informant get up on the stand, left hand on the Bible, right hand swear to tell the truth, and lie through their teeth. And the government doesn't care as long as the lie is fitting into the story and it can't be caught. They don't care. That's the problem you have with these informants. They buy themselves out by telling stories, and that's exactly what happened with Machota.
Yeah, in the world you were in, were those type of accusations common and those type of deals very common?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a case right now, I'm going to be honest, my dear friend, Michael, who did 34 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, because a prosecutor and FBI lied and implicated him and then withheld testimony that could have put him out of prison. I'm trying to get him a pardon right now. Poor guy, 34 years in prison because a prosecutor lied, Andrew Weissman, I'll mention his name, and Lynn DeVecchio, an FBI agent that was charged with 4 murders because he was feeding information to...
An FBI agent?
He was charged with 4 murders.
With 4 murders?
4 murders. And the reason was he was feeding information to an FBI informant who I knew very well, Greg Scarpa, big name out there. And Greg Scarpa was taking that information and killing people, murdering them.
Oh my God.
Based upon FBI. This is a fact, documentation, nothing. I don't make anything up. So this is what happens in that life. So you don't give informants the ability to hurt other people and giving them the incentive to lie. Listen, John Gotti. Anybody would believe any story about John Gotti because they wanted him so bad. And people were lining up to give stories about him. I'm not saying every one of them lied, but you certainly have incentive to lie. You think John Gotti was the worst person out there? No, he just happened to be the biggest name. He just happened to make careers. People wanted him. The FBI were drooling to get a hold of him because they get careers made on this. So I don't like the system at all. I don't like informant system at all. I'm sorry. They get too much of an advantage for lying.
And how do you think that could be changed? Is that just incentives? Is that some laws that need to be changed?
I mean, there has to be a limit to what, okay, you're going to help the government, but there has to be a limit to the advantage that you get. If you murdered, a number of people, you shouldn't be walking the street because you implicated somebody else. If you commit 10 murders, right? And you're implicating a guy that committed 2, why should you get a bigger advantage? Because he has a bigger name than you. And that's what happens. That's the system. And I challenge anybody to, because when I say this, I know it. I lived it and I know it. I challenge anybody to challenge me on that because I'll give them the evidence.
And what do you think of karma, right? Because you talk about your dad, you talk about your good friend who served time for what you say is something that they're innocent of, but maybe they did some other bad stuff in their life that they were guilty of that they didn't get charged for. And maybe that's just the karma that they ended up getting, in their life. What do you think of that?
I believe that, but I don't think it's the government's, shouldn't impose that karma.
Maybe that's not the government. Maybe that's God's way of doing it.
Well, maybe, but the government doesn't have let me tell you something. Our government has all the tools, all the money, all the time, all the weapons, all the laws. They don't have the right to frame somebody because of something they believe they did. They have enough weapons to go and get somebody. Because if you allow that, just think of it, Will, if you allow that, what do we really have? Government, anytime they want to put something on you, they'll do whether you did it or not. Well, you didn't do this, but you got away with a number of things. You can't have that. We would be a dictatorship and an anarchy.
Okay, let's talk about Larry, Champagne Larry.
Okay. You're going heavy on this, but I'm ready for you. It's okay.
All right. He was the godfather of 3 of your children.
2.
2.
Yeah.
2 of your children. And you said, and I want to quote you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I knew it was going to happen and I didn't save him.
Yeah.
When you knew it was going to happen, what was going through your head? And talk about your relationship with Larry.
I loved him like a brother. He was one of my dearest friends. Our families were close. But he made, with respect to that life, he made a very serious mistake. And here's the painful part of it. I believe that the consequences were severe because I tried to get him, I was a captain, and I tried to get him in my crew. And the boss at the time wouldn't allow it because they didn't want us to, he was a good guy on the street. He was an undertaker. He was a pretty good earner. And I wanted him with me because we were close. We were like brothers. But they wouldn't give him to me. And they kept him with somebody else. And he was resentful of that. And I didn't care for it either. But I think that I tried to save him. He did something he shouldn't have done. No question about it.
What did he do? Can you tell me that?
He had an affair with my sister. He had an affair with my sister. And he was married at the time. And this was brought to my attention. I didn't know it. I didn't discover it. My sister didn't tell me. It was brought to my attention. And the decision was made that it was very disrespectful to me and then to my father. And when I argued, and I said, listen, he's not a made guy. He made a mistake. I can correct it. No, your father's been in this life a long time, and so have you, and we don't allow that. So it was very painful, even though I knew that he what he did was wrong. No question about it.
How did you feel? Did you feel disrespected because this is something that you didn't even know was happening?
I did feel disrespected, but I mean, come on, to pay for it with your life.
So I'm guessing you didn't pull the trigger, but you were maybe part of a sit down, or you knew this was going to happen.
Well, let's put it this way. They didn't give me specifics. And at the time I said, listen, why don't you consult my father about this? And my dad was in prison at the time. I said, why don't you consult him? If you're saying that it's disrespectful for him, why don't we get his opinion on it? And I honestly don't know if that ever happened. I don't know that. But at some point it was out of my hands.
Does that line between ordering it, doing it, or allowing it actually mean anything?
Let's put it this way. That doesn't only apply to Larry. When I was 20 years in that life, I knew a lot of guys that made mistakes and were gone after that. So if you're part of that life, don't you have to take responsibility for all of it? It's not any one particular person, because you're part of the life. Things go down. But that's part of the evils of the life. Yeah.
Right up until that happened, were you guys very close? Like you said, you were basically best friends.
Yeah.
And so does that still stay with you today?
Sure it does. It stayed with me to a point where a few years back, I got an email from somebody really close to him, one of his kids. And it was a very painful email for me to read. And it took me a while to digest it. And then I responded. And the email that I got back really was a blessing, because that person understood what went down. Because people, look, everybody says, I get the blame for that. Michelle lied and said that Larry was part of the gasoline business. He never had anything to do with gas. Total fabrication, 100% lie, had zero to do with it. Never. And he said he made that up. That was part of the reason that Larry got killed. Not true at all. It was one reason and one reason only. Aside from, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I was also told that he was dealing drugs. I happen to know that there was a little bit of truth in that. I'll leave it at that. But as far as him being involved in gas, absolutely. But he had to embellish his reasoning with me for some reason. But, people say that, I hear it on social media and all this kind of stuff. But look, of course it's painful. And he's not the only one. There are other people I knew that were gone. Not that I could have done anything about it. See, that's the thing. If a decision is made, it's out of my hands at that point. I can't do anything about it. Now, could you have warned him? That's up for me to internally deal with.
Right. If you could go back, not before, let's say, the order came, but to the moment where you could have warned him, what would you have done?
I don't know that I would have.
Really? Why?
I was part of that life. Look, a strong case was made about it. Now, nobody said to me, this is what's going to happen. I felt pretty concerned when I walked out of the room after this was laid out to me, but You know, when I left, I said, like I said, consult the people, let me think about it, you know. And I was told straight out, we don't want you talking to anybody about this.
And how long after that meeting was he dead?
It was a while.
Did you talk to him after you found out what he did, between that time and his death?
About that? No.
At all? Any conversations with him?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, this is, you know, almost 40 years ago now.
When you talked to him, did you confront him about what he did, or did you just
I did not.
You played along as you guys are just friends still?
Yeah.
Okay, let's pivot. So your children were kind of growing up through this, right? When did they find out, right, who their father actually was, and what did that conversation look like?
Well, my kids knew early on because, again, I had a lot of publicity. But my kids, until today, don't talk to me about it. They don't question me. They don't ask me anything about it. I don't understand that. And honestly, they're not inquisitive. My two daughters now have a podcast, and I think me sitting down with them in their podcast, I finally got some of their thoughts about what they thought about me during that time, you know? They don't ask me about it. I don't know why. I think I have to credit my wife where she just, you know, she raised them properly, and even when I was away, they were cared for the right way, and I can't explain it. I don't know why. It's kind of baffling to me at times. Hey, why don't you sit? Hey, Dad, what went on there? No, nothing. So, but I guess that's a good thing. You know, it's a good thing. So
you didn't, when you're growing up, there wasn't conversations about who you are, what you're doing, the life you're involved in. You just kind of treat it as like, let's just try to give them as normal of a childhood as we can.
Yeah,
but absolutely. I still have the feds here, and I got, you know, a lot of
they
big
lived
business
through
I'm
it.
running.
Yeah, they lived through it. I never forget once. I was in LA County Jail. They had me there for some reason, and my wife and Dad's in school, and then my oldest daughter at the time, well, how come it says LA County Jail on this? We had to explain that, but. You know, I'm happy. Look, I don't want to sit down and talk to them about my former life. Same way I don't want to sit with my wife. I've never had to sit down and have a conversation. What my wife is hearing now is more than she ever heard in 40 years, 42 years. Never discussed any of this because I don't want to. And fortunately, they don't bug me about it or ask me about it because it's yesterday's stuff.